Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So I thought I'd do a video talking about the protests that are taking place in France. I was just reading an article about this, and some of the things that I was reading within this article make a lot of sense when you start looking at it from the economic forces of the Cantillon Effect and the bullwhip effect. Now, it's easy to point your finger at politics and say, hey, you're the reason this is happening, you need to fix this, figure this thing out, right? But it's harder to try and understand why it's taken place through an economic point of view when it comes to the economic forces that are at play. So when we think about the bullwhip effect is when there is disruptions within the retail space that send a ripple throughout the distribution network all the way up to the manufacturers. So for whatever reason, if there's all of a sudden a lack of supply, like we experienced during the pandemic, and there's all of a sudden this huge demand that picks up because of this lack of supply, people are now buying extra amounts. They think they're being allocated again, so they buy ever increasing amounts more, or they're ordering ever increasing amounts more. And so they see these ever increasing orders coming in, and then they start ramping up production, only to find that by the time the production has made it to the retail side, all of a sudden the retail is not there, the demand is gone. And now this starts causing the manufacturing base to slow down dramatically. We are actually experiencing this throughout China right now, if you go and look at some of the manufacturing issues that are happening there. But when we turn back here to France and we look at some of the protests that are happening, and we look at what some of the people are saying, that the food has gotten very expensive. Now, this is the Cantillon effect taking place. Okay? So there's two things happening at the same time. This is why it's important to understand these economic forces. Because the bullwhip effect is one, when the prices shot up during the pandemic, a lot of investment went into food production. When that investment goes into food production, all of a sudden there's too much food production taking place, and now you have an oversupply coming in. Okay? This is what ended up happening in other nations. Not just in France, right? But other nations out there as well. And now the food that they have produced is incredibly cheap comparatively to the food that is produced in France. This is part of the Cantillon effect. So now this imported food is cheaper than what can be produced in France, and now the French farmers are saying, now what do we do? During the pandemic, all these prices shot up as far as fuel costs, labor costs, all the other costs that goes into it, but now the food prices, in order to be competitive, either have to be subsidized or you have to have tariffs on there, but the food becomes more expensive for the people within that country if they're going to be buying domestic food. They need to be buying foreign production food. So now what happens to the domestic farmers? They start to fail, right? Unless the government saves them. So ever increasing amounts of these subsidies and tariffs have to be put onto the food supply out there, making it more expensive for the people. See, this isn't like, what are you going to do about it politically? Right? That's what they're trying to do. Tariffs and subsidies. Charge more for the food coming in, and then try and support these farmers with taxpayers' money. No matter what, it's going to cost you. And so if you understand it in this fashion, then now maybe there's something you can do about it. My suggestion to it is try to grow your own food and become more independent. That's not necessarily an easy answer for a lot of people to do. So what are you going to do about it? Right? You're going to end up paying a lot more for your food, because there's not a lot you can do about it. See, these are the economic forces at play. To make your government do something. Make them make you grow your own food. Right? Because that would help. Then you wouldn't have to buy as much food from the farmers. Right? It's not the farmer's fault. This is the Cantillon effect. This is what happens when the manufacturing within the nation becomes so expensive that foreign production starts to compete in driving out ever-increasing amounts of domestic manufacturing. You can find this happening over and over again. There's no point in blaming politics on it. You can if you want, because it's easy to do and it's a lot of fun, and you can do stuff and make a big scene out there, right? But at the end of the day, there's really not a whole lot they're going to be able to do about it, right? Except for charge you more, either tax you more or charge you more for your food with tariffs and subsidies. Right? So again, this is the bullwhip effect that's happening out there, left over from the supply chain breakdowns that were happening during the COVID, times, the COVID lockdowns. This breakdown of the supply chain shot the prices up. Investments started pouring into it. Right? Expensive food started being produced in the domestic area of France. Foreign production started competing. It's like so easy to see. Like, those of you who follow my channel know that this is exactly what's happening. And so we can blame it, again, we can blame it on politics if you choose to. And there's a lot of blame to go around. And I mean, it's a lot of fun. Like, you can make a big scene out of it. Right? And then everybody wants to talk about it and say who's right and who's wrong. But nobody wants to talk about the political, or I'm sorry, talk outside of the political arena and go into economic forces that are taking place and that there's not much you can do about it. So if you want more information on stuff like this, I suggest you join the channel. It's $1 a month. It's $1 to you, but it's everything to me. And I do a lot of research to break down some of this stuff, like the Cantillon Effect. Cantillon is an economist from about 300 years ago or so. He wrote one of the first essays on economics. It's called Cantillon's Essay on Economic Theory. Chapters on increase and decrease of money to the state is probably the most informative chapters you could ever read on economics. I suggest you go and check it out. I'll leave a link down in the description to that essay. And think about some of the things that I've said within this video, and you go and look at the article and you think about it, right? The food has gotten expensive in this particular area. What's going to happen? Domestic manufacturing is going to start competing. The distance that it takes to get from their location to France, in the cost that's incorporated with that, is made up with the discount and the food price from the production that they can do cheaper in their foreign land. So the cost reduction in their foreign land and the traveling that it takes to get to France is still cheaper than producing food in France itself. This is the epitome of like the Cantillon Effect, right? And you can see it happening in real time. But most of it is going to get blamed on politics. And again, like, if you want to blame it on politics, there's a lot to go around. You can see it even within the article itself. The protesting means that you need to do something. Like, why would you protest if you knew why it was taking place? But most people don't. And since they don't understand what's happening and they just get frustrated with it, then they got to throw some blame around and they end up doing that. But yet, if you just looked at it for what it is and you look at the economic theories behind it, then it starts making a whole lot more sense. All right, I'm going to go back to work. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.